The night sky above Yemen erupted in fire. Allied jets roared overhead as missiles streaked toward their targets, pounding Houthi positions dug into the rugged mountains. Explosions lit the horizon in waves, echoing across the desert valleys. From the port of Hudaydah to the hills near Sana'a, the thunder of U.S. and British strikes rolled for miles, shattering the illusion that this was still a contained conflict. The Red Sea, one of the world's most vital arteries of trade, had become a battlefield. The strikes came after weeks of escalating attacks. Oil tankers burned on the horizon, commercial ships were harassed by swarms of drones, and missiles launched from Houthi-controlled territory forced global shipping giants to divert their vessels thousands of miles around Africa. Each incident pushed the world closer to crisis. Now, with Allied warplanes hammering targets inside Yemen, the fight had burst into the open. For the United States and its partners, the message was clear. The Houthis had crossed a line. Supported by Iranian technology, emboldened by years of war, they had begun to threaten not just Saudi Arabia and the Gulf states, but the very lifeline of global commerce. Nearly 15% of the world's trade flows through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal. If these waters fall into chaos, the shockwaves will be felt in every corner of the planet. On the ground, the destruction was immediate. Missile batteries were reduced to twisted wreckage, radar sites engulfed in flames. Yet for every explosion, Houthi spokesmen declared defiance, vowing to strike back with more drones, more rockets, more attacks on the ships that dared cross their waters. The Red Sea had become a chessboard of warships and missiles, every move watched by a nervous world. Where are you watching this from right now? Tell us, because the events unfolding in Yemen tonight are not confined to the Middle East. They reach into every port, every market, every home that depends on the lifeline of trade across these waters. And what comes next could decide whether the Red Sea stays open, or whether the world's commerce grinds to a halt. It did not begin with bombs from American jets. It began with fire on the water. Cargo ships moving through the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, that narrow gateway between the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aden, suddenly found themselves under attack. Missiles streaked out from the Yemeni coast. Armed drones dived from the sky. Tankers carrying oil and container vessels filled with goods bound for Europe and Asia were forced into frantic evasive maneuvers as explosions erupted around them. The Houthis, a movement hardened by nearly a decade of war inside Yemen, claimed responsibility. They boasted that they could strike any ship, anywhere, and that the Red Sea belonged to them. For the first time, global shipping giants suspended operations through one of the world's most important sea lanes. Each day of disruption cost billions. Every vessel rerouted around Africa added weeks to delivery times, rattling supply chains from Shanghai to Rotterdam. Intelligence reports painted a clearer picture. The Houthis were no longer fighting with improvised weapons scavenged from the battlefield. They now possessed advanced missiles, drones, and radar systems, tools supplied and guided by Iran. Tehran denied direct involvement, but the fingerprints were undeniable. Components traced back to Iranian factories, training provided by Revolutionary Guard units. The Houthis had become a proxy force capable of projecting power far beyond Yemen's borders. The United States and its allies watched with growing alarm. The threat was no longer regional. It was global. Nearly 15% of the world's seaborne trade passed through the Red Sea and into the Suez Canal. Oil, gas, grain, electronics, medicine, all suddenly at risk of being cut off. In capitals from Washington to London to Berlin, the conclusion was the same. This was not a nuisance, it was an economic weapon. The breaking point came when a massive oil tanker, flagged to an allied nation, was struck near the strait. Flames towered above the deck, smoke rising high into the sky as the crew fought for their lives. The images flashed across screens worldwide. The Red Sea, once a lifeline of trade, now a war zone. The message was undeniable. If the attacks continued, global commerce itself could collapse. That was the moment the decision was made. The Houthis had gone too far. Quiet consultations between Washington, London, and regional allies ended with a single conclusion. Strikes were necessary. The Red Sea had to remain open at all costs. And so, the plans for retaliation began to move from briefing rooms to launch pads, from quiet deliberation to roaring engines of war. The operation began with silence, then broke with thunder. In the early hours before dawn, the skies above Yemen lit up as Allied warplanes screamed overhead. From the decks of U.S. destroyers stationed in the Red Sea, Tomahawk cruise missiles rose into the night, their fiery trails arcing toward the Yemeni coastline. Moments later, explosions rippled across Houthi-controlled territory, striking radar installations, missile launch sites, and drone hangars hidden in the mountains. The strikes were meticulously coordinated. British fighter jets launched from carriers in the region, striking storage depots near Houthis. French and American aircraft targeted command centers deep inside Sana'a, while Gulf allies provided intelligence on suspected launch zones. Within minutes, dozens of targets were engulfed in flames, their positions mapped and destroyed with precision-guided munitions. From the ground, the spectacle was terrifying. Residents of coastal villages watched the horizon glow with fire as shockwaves rattled windows and doors. In Sana'a, buildings shook under the impact of airstrikes, sending plumes of smoke spiraling into the sky. For the Houthis, the suddenness of the assault was overwhelming. Many of their missile batteries never fired a shot. Communications went down, command posts were obliterated, and critical drone stockpiles vanished in clouds of fire. U.S. officials described the mission as both defensive and decisive. The goal was not to occupy territory or overthrow the Houthis, but to dismantle their ability to strike ships in the Red Sea. Still, the scale was unprecedented. Hundreds of strikes in a single night, the most significant Western military action in Yemen in years. Naval commanders declared shipping lanes temporarily secure, and tankers resumed their cautious passage under escort of Allied warships. Yet even amid the devastation, the risks were clear. The Houthis were not a conventional army that could be destroyed in a day. They were insurgents, hardened by years of war, skilled at dispersing, hiding, and rebuilding. Many of their launchers were mounted on mobile platforms, easily moved into mountain caves or disguised among civilian areas. For every radar tower reduced to rubble, another could be deployed in weeks. On the ground, Houthi spokesmen emerged defiantly on television, promising that their fight was far from over. "You will not close our skies. You will not close our sea," one commander declared, his voice hard against the backdrop of burning wreckage. Within hours, reports came of fresh missiles being prepared, drones fueled and armed for counterstrikes. The message was unmistakable. The strikes had crippled the Houthis' immediate capabilities, but they had not broken their will. If anything, the war had now entered a new and more dangerous phase, one where retaliation could come at any time, anywhere along the Red Sea. The retaliation came quickly. Even as smoke still rose from the ruins of their launch sites, the Houthis struck back with a fury that showed they were far from finished. Within 48 hours, drones launched from hidden mountain pads swarmed toward the shipping lanes once again. Some were intercepted by U.S. warships patrolling the Red Sea, their close-in weapons systems spitting tracers into the night sky. Others slipped through, detonating dangerously close to commercial vessels, sending crews scrambling and insurers into panic. Missiles, too, roared from the Yemeni highlands. A barrage streaked toward Saudi Arabia, forcing Riyadh to activate its Patriot batteries in a desperate race to intercept. In the United Arab Emirates, air raid sirens wailed as radars picked up drones headed for port facilities. The message was unmistakable. Despite the Allied onslaught, the Houthis still had the reach to spread chaos across the region. Their spokesman appeared on television draped in flags, declaring that the American aggression had only hardened their resolve. They promised to make the Red Sea a graveyard for foreign invaders. Behind their fiery words, intelligence reports painted an even darker picture. Iranian cargo planes had been observed landing in the region weeks earlier. Revolutionary Guard trainers were believed to be advising on tactics, upgrading drones with longer range and more sophisticated guidance systems. Tehran denied direct involvement, but its fingerprints were everywhere. For Washington and its allies, the reality was sobering. The strikes had destroyed dozens of sites, but they had not erased the threat. The Houthis operated like a shadow force, mobile, dispersed, embedded among civilians. For every launcher destroyed, another could emerge from a cave. For every drone shot down, new shipments of parts could arrive across desert routes controlled by smuggling networks. Naval commanders now faced a grim dilemma. To protect global shipping, warships would have to remain on constant patrol in the Red Sea, their radars sweeping the skies, their crews on edge every hour of every day. The Houthis did not need to sink dozens of ships to win. One successful strike on a tanker or container vessel could send shockwaves through global markets, forcing companies to abandon the route entirely. And so, the shadow of Iran loomed large. Was this simply a local insurgent movement lashing out, or part of a broader strategy by Tehran to bleed America and its allies, to choke the arteries of world trade, and to demonstrate that no sea was safe? The question hung in the air as missiles continued to fall, as drones buzzed overhead, and as the Red Sea trembled on the edge of becoming the world's most dangerous waterway. The economic aftershocks were immediate and brutal. Within days of the first attacks, major shipping companies announced they would no longer risk the Red Sea. Container vessels rerouted around the Cape of Good Hope, adding thousands of miles and weeks of travel time to journeys between Asia and Europe. Oil tankers diverted as well, forcing markets to recalculate supply chains that had been stable for decades. The costs spiraled upward. Freight prices tripled almost overnight. Insurance premiums for ships crossing anywhere near Yemen skyrocketed to record levels. In Europe, shelves began to empty as supply chains faltered, electronics delayed, energy shipments postponed, raw materials stranded at sea. Asian exporters fumed as contracts collapsed under the weight of shipping delays. The Suez Canal, once a proud artery of global commerce, stood eerily quiet as traffic dwindled to a trickle. Markets responded with panic. Oil prices surged as traders feared a prolonged closure of the Red Sea corridor. Stock exchanges trembled under the weight of uncertainty, with energy companies soaring while airlines and manufacturers bled. Governments convened emergency meetings. In Brussels, leaders warned that the continent's economy was being strangled. In Tokyo and Seoul, officials called for immediate naval cooperation to secure trade routes. Even in Washington, advisors admitted privately that America could not sustain a global economy if one of its most critical shipping lanes remained under fire. But the consequences went beyond money. Politically, the crisis exposed fault lines among allies. European leaders pushed for expanded operations to crush the Houthi threat completely, while others worried that a deeper war would pull the West into a quagmire in Yemen. In Asia, nations that relied heavily on the Red Sea route began demanding a stronger say in Western strategy. "If our trade is at risk, then this is our war too," one Asian diplomat declared. For ordinary people, the effects were felt in rising prices at gas stations, shortages in supermarkets, and delayed deliveries of everything from cars to medicine. The Red Sea, once a distant name on a map, was suddenly at the center of their daily lives. Families in Europe and Asia who had never heard of Houthis or the Bab el-Mandeb Strait now knew them as the choke points choking their wallets. And as the crisis deepened, one chilling reality became impossible to ignore. A regional insurgency had just paralyzed global trade. The Houthis, a movement once dismissed as a local militia, had forced the entire world to its knees. The horizon of the Red Sea now glows with fire. Tankers drift scarred and smoking, their crews shaken from near misses with missiles and drones. Warships prowl the waters, their radars locked on the skies, every sailor knowing that the next alarm could signal the strike that changes everything. From Sanaa's mountains to the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, the echoes of war roll endlessly, each explosion sending shockwaves through global markets and political halls thousands of miles away. This is no longer a distant regional conflict. The fight in Yemen has transformed into a struggle for the lifeline of world trade. Billions of dollars hang on every ship that dares to cross these waters. Every drone launched by the Houthis, every missile streaking from the desert, is not only an attack on vessels, it is a strike at the beating heart of the global economy. For Washington and its allies, the strikes were meant to restore order. Instead, they may have opened a new front in an endless war. The Houthis remain defiant, Iran's shadow looms over every move, and the Red Sea, once a highway of commerce, is now a battlefield watched by the entire world. The question that lingers is terrifying in its simplicity. Will these strikes be enough to keep the Red Sea open? Or has the world already stepped onto the path of a wider war that no one can control? What do you think? Can America and its allies secure these waters? Or is the Red Sea destined to become the spark that sets the world's trade and its peace on fire?